What's going on all, it's Hadex Gaming here, and today I am bringing a new video. Today, I want to do a challenge run for being completely zoomed in. So, let's call it zoomed in, that's going to be my word name. Let's go brutal mode, so not only will I be completely zoomed in, it will be brutal mode too, so that means damage taken is increased, boss health is increased, enemy spawn rate is increased, knockback is less, and the rate of damage is more increased as well. So, let's create a world and get started. Let's create a new character to go with it. We are in our world, so let's get things started by zooming the entire way in. 400% zoom, you can see it down the bottom left here. This is how I'm going to do this playthrough. So let's get started. What I do want to say is you will see down the bottom right here, it says work in progress. This is because the devs have been so kind to give me early access to the preview of the updates. What this means is that some of these sections may be unfinished or are work in progress. So if you do see anything that may not be the normal or looks unfinished, that could be it. But as far as I'm aware, everything looks like it will be in the updates. Alright, just jumping back. I forgot about the map. I was going to play with no mini map, but I think that may be too tough being completely zoomed in and on brutal mode. So what I might do is just click show and then zoom the mini map the entire way in. That way I do have some small idea of where I am, but not much. And then let's raid the Elder's house for a settlement flag, a map, and some food. Also, the graphics update looks amazing, and I figured playing zoomed in, you can see everything that is going on. All right, let's start off by grabbing a quest. And let's go do that in the caves. Let's check that out. Our first look in the caves. And it is creepy. So let's craft a whole bunch of torches. Place them down. Whoa, this looks cool. This feels like a whole new game with the textures, the rework, the graphics, and then obviously being completely zoomed in. So I need a pickaxe. Alright, back with the pickaxe. So, the rules of the playthrough. The game will be zoomed in at 400% zoom, which is the maximum I could. The mini-map will also be zoomed all the way in. I am allowed to use the main map, as checking it does still leave me vulnerable, but I'll try not to use it unless I get completely lost. I'll also be playing on brutal mode, the hardest difficulty there is, and raids will be active. Finally, the run ends when the fallen wizard is defeated, as that is the last active quest. So starting off this run, I want to go over my playthrough checklist. I will have an early game and ongoing goals, a pre-deep caves checklist, and a post-deep caves checklist. So getting into the early game and ongoing goals, I want to do the following. Start a small settlement with the following. A hunter or angler for consistent food. Ideally, an angler is better, as the fish they catch will prove to be useful for potions in the end game. A guard so they can assist not just during boss fights, but for when I'm looting and mining. A wizard for enchanting. An animal keeper for milk, which will be super important later on. A pirate captain, as he will be my source of money, but I'll explain that a bit later down the track. I also want to set up crafting automation for smelting, cooking, potions, logs, foods, crops, and resources. This is important as sunflowers, cave glow, and wheat will be critical in maintaining my potions and supplies. I also want to set up a husbandry zone with cows for food and milk, and ideally one for sheep for the wool that I'll need. Finally, I want to set up a full storage automation system so that way I can spend more time dying on brutal mode and less time sorting through my junk. With the ongoing goals out of the way, let's go through my pre-deep cave goals to get me to the deep caves and defeat the pirate captain. So what I want to do is defeat the first boss enough times to obtain demonic armor. This is the early game tank armor and should carry me through most of the early game. I then want to defeat the Spider Queen, the Swamp Guardian, the Ancient Vulture, and finally the Pirate Captain, making any upgrades as I need. Finally, I'll want the following trinkets to assist me throughout the entire run. A balanced foci. I can obtain one of these by obtaining all 4 foci from the Evil's Protector, and this will net me 15% damage and will become even more useful a bit later into the deep caves. Next up, I want a frozen heart found in the ice caves. This will give me 50 extra HP, which is essentially 1 extra hit I can take in brutal mode. Next, the air vessel found in desert caves, which allows me to dash 3 times with the force of wind trinket. And finally, the lifeline trinket found on the pirate island. This means if I die, I do get to respawn once per 5 minutes to about half health, which means I can take another extra hit. So starting off the run, I needed some basic armor and preferably a ranged or magic weapon so that I could keep my distance from enemies. So as I was exploring, I broke open a vampire nest, obtained some fake fangs from a fake vampire, obviously, and nearly got 2-shot by the enemies. After feeding them, I quickly lit the place up with torches and proceeded to defile and loot the grapes. Heading back to my settlement, I handed in my quest and obtained a new one to defeat the Evil's Protector. Now, I was in no shape to fight the Evil's Protector yet, and I knew that I needed housing for future settlers. So I chopped some trees and started on some housing. Once that was complete, I quickly realized that settler happiness is indeed a thing, and I would need beds. Instead of murdering all the sheep, I probably should have made some shears and set up a small sheep farm. Instead, I set sail to a local village to see if they had any sheep. As I shored up on the desert, I found an ostrich and quickly executed it for the inefficient feather to use the ostrich mount. I then checked around and found some sheep to slaughter for their wool and for some quick early game food. After pillaging the village for beds, hide, wool, and bits and pieces, I thought let's cause some havoc and summon the first boss in the middle of the town. This was both for a bit of fun, but some strategy as well. What most don't know is that a settlement that's not your own deal massive damage to enemies, so it was my idea that they would do all the bullet sponging and hard work, and I could reap the rewards. So most of the fights will be me dodging projectiles and the boss being out of sight. This meant I had to rely on the settlers, homing missiles, or summons to do all my dirty work. With the first kill down, I got the Force of Wind Trinket, which allows me to dash. I also got a Demon Cloak for an extra item set, which I won't be using, and a Demon Heart to give me an extra 100 HP. This means I'll be able to survive another 2 or 3 hits. One of my goals was to defeat the boss enough times to obtain all 4 Foci Trinkets. So I sacrificed some demonic bars that the first one gave me to make more boss summons. So off I went and summoned my second boss. This was a pretty clean kill, especially now that I had 200 HP. Two down and 2 to go. Next up, 3 down, 1 more to go. I knew I needed more demonic bars, and this time I pushed my luck and summoned 2 at once. I unfortunately got killed in the process, but at the same time that I did, one of the Evil's Protectors also died, netting me my 4th and final kill. So as I respawned, I handed in my quest and obtained a lunchbox. This is always handy as it provides extra inventory space for food, which means my pack is less cluttered. I then went, collected my items from my corpse, hired my first settler for the playthrough, Arthur, the guard, as I believe they have extra HP, so they are the perfect companion to take with me. I then set sail to the dungeon as I needed void shards to create my demonic armor. Once there, I tried to kill them but failed miserably. Naturally, my stubbornness told me to go back and try again, so I returned, got my gear again, and then got jumped by a stabby bush. But I did get the stabby summon, which little did I know at the time would turn out to be the MVP of the entire video. So I got my shards, got 2 pieces of demonic armor, and set to the caves so that I could acquire some gold and hire an angler that was hanging about my settlement. Being afraid to lose an early chance to get the angler, I used the minimap to scout for them whilst they were leaving, and it became a race against me vs how fast the angler wanted to leave. With just enough time, I caught up to her and hired her. Thankfully, I also had just enough money, leaving me with a peasant's amount of 2 gold coins. This is huge as an early angler means a steady supply of food. I then took a quick moment to combine my 4 foci into one of the best trinkets, the balanced foci. I began work on a storage room, going back and forth, getting wood, making chests, floors, walls, etc. And then finally sorting all my chests so that they could all be filtered so I could find stuff easier down the track and be completely automated. About halfway through the building, I got bored and finalized my demonic set with the boots, completing the armor set. Scouted down and hired a hunter and followed him home as I was completely lost in this forest. I then decided whilst it was nighttime to take on the Evil's Protector again so I could craft a demonic spear. I then also took the time to set up a mini forest so that my settlers could acquire me logs whilst I was off exploring. I now had storage, a settlement, automation of logs and food, and it was time to set sail to the snow biome. Naturally, whilst I was there, I ransacked a bunch of beds and headed into the caves. I just quickly want to say that I love that I'm playing 400% zoomed in. It feels like a whole new game, but on top of the graphic rework, it is absolutely phenomenal. So much credit is due to the artists, and another big thank you to Fair and the team for giving me early access so I could showcase it with you all. I figured I had some armor. This is arguably one of the easiest bosses, so I gave it a shot and broke the royal egg. This did indeed end in death. Fighting bosses I can't see until it's too late poses such a huge threat in brutal mode, as it means my reflexes have to be lightning quick as I have mere split seconds to react. So instead of trying again, I went back, explored, found a new summon, the magic branch, for some snowmen, hired a miner to the settlement with some gold, copper, and gold ore, and then decided it would be a good time to buff up and tackle the boss again. Sadly, I didn't win this time either, but it was a much closer fight, and I died with the spider having a mere 1%. I figured that fight went so well, I decided I didn't need new gear, I just needed a larger arena and a little bit more skill. So after clearing up the room, I summoned the spider for the 3rd time. I've just got this fight sped up by 200%, but as you can see, this fight went way smoother than the previous fights. But was still a little dicey, and I only won with a shred of HP. After the fight, I returned to the Elder and handed them both in, obtaining an item attractor and an ammo pouch. With 2 out of 6 pre-deep mode bosses defeated, it was time for me to head to the dungeon to find, prepare, and fight the Void Wizard. Whilst I was in the Void dungeon, I realized my biggest obstacle hasn't really been the bosses, but the time spent searching for things. With a restricted minimap and a small field of view, it meant that whilst exploring caves, scouring forests, and adventuring, it takes forever to find anything I need, but also the amount of enemies I bump into just because I can't see them. Combine that with the difficulty of brutal mode, and it's a quick way for me to end up dead. Anyway, what felt like a good half hour exploring the dungeon, I got an alert to say that the raiders were attacking my settlement. I wasn't prepared for this. I just finished defeating the spider boss, and they were at a tier above mine. But I had to stop them. On brutal mode, the raiders don't just stop when they kill 1 or 2 of my settlers. They will wipe out an entire civilization, so I had to be careful and act fast. I had sailed out to catch them early and attempted to pick them off at the shoreline. I could ambush them with my stabby bushes and hide in the trees to obtain cover and take shots at them with the reach of my spear. As I was fighting, I got lost and couldn't find them. However, they came to me and my snowmen swiftly dealt with the remainder of the raid. The raiders retreated, my settlement lives to see another day, and I survived without a single death. So before I went out to tackle the Void Wizard, I quickly made some more housing for existing and future settlers so they would be happy. And from there, I took off to the Void Wizard. After some time exploring again, I managed to stumble across the Void Wizard staircase. This was boss number 3. A tough boss as he uses many projectiles, clones, and missiles, and you pair that with how zoomed in I was, I couldn't see a thing. I started the fight off by buffing up, summoning my snowmen, my icicle spears for instant damage, and spawning 3 stabby bushes on top of him so they would activate the second he became aggressive. At about the 50% health mark, I took the opportunity to summon 3 more stabby bushes during his transition. This phase was tougher as he becomes extremely mobile, and my summons had to be within a close enough proximity if they were to fight, which meant I had to get closer. The fight ended with my summons pulling through as he sent one last ditch effort and killed me at the same time. I'm counting that as a win in my books though. So I went back, obtained my loot, used the pendant for an extra trinket slot, and obtained what would be the most useless item this whole run. It is a weapon which follows my cursor. Normally this would be a really cool weapon, but my cursor couldn't see more than a 5-tile radius. Moving on from that, we are now 3 of 6 pre-deep mode bosses down. So I turned in my quest, obtained a void bag, claimed a quest to deliver slime chunks, and decided to head on over to the swamp. Exploring the swamp was going better than I expected until I found an opening and got jumped by way too many enemies, bringing my death count to 6. So I used a travel scroll to return back. Took revenge on the slimes that nearly killed me yet again. Got my items, mined some ivy ore, and died very quickly after that as well. The swamp was becoming difficult, yet I persisted through. Continued exploring and obtaining ivy ore, and then returned back to see how much armor I could make. I started off by smelting down the ore and visited a nearby settlement to hire their wizard, as enchanting items would be key for the entire run. But with the wizard, I would also have access to purchase travel scrolls. Returning to my workstations, I still didn't have enough of the ivy bars or swamp sludge, so I dove deeper into the swamp caves and stupidly got myself killed on thorns, whilst trying to gain some distance between myself and the slimes. I picked myself back up and used what I had gathered to craft the full ivy set. Whilst it was a little less in defense, it offered resilience, which acts as a temporary health gained by causing physical damage. With my new armor set, I was ready to defeat the swamp boss. I started by clearing an arena with bombs and dynamite that I had acquired, and then summoned in my stabby bushes. They seemed to be the reigning champions for summoners, and then called forth the Swamp Guardian. All I can say is this fight was very short-lived, and once again, it's due to not being able to see the direction the boss is coming from, or where the projectiles are coming from. So I either had to get good, or come up with a new strategy to carry me through this. Me being me, I learnt nothing and threw myself into the fight again. This time, it went better than before. So whilst it plays out, can I just mention how amazing this boss now looks? It truly is a mutation of the swamp. But let's not get carried away. I died again, but this time just below 50% HP. I definitely needed a new strategy. I came back again, this time with potions, some new enchants, and cleared out a bigger arena. With the boss summoned and off to a rocky start, my plan this time was to utilize the resilience gain from the ivy spear to get enough resilience to tank a floating projectile or two, and let my stabby bushes and summons do the heavy work on the boss. This kinda worked, and yet again, we traded hits and both died. But as I said before, a win's a win. P.S. He dropped the Guardian Shell trinket that gives me a small shield for a few seconds. With the boss defeated, I reported back to the Elder and obtained a Homestone and Waystones. This allows me to set up teleport pillars around the place, which is what I did, and I'm now onto the desert quests. I headed down into the desert explored around and stumbled across 2 treasure rooms with ancient statues. This guarantees me at least 2 boss attempts should I need them. And then got sniped out of nowhere while I was collecting some quartz. Upon returning to my corpse, I decided to try my luck at the vulture and was met with a swift death. This made me realize I probably needed to change my gear and crafted a full set of quartz summon armor, as more summons meant more damage. With my new set, I tried my luck again at the underground ancient vulture, and whilst I was doing really well at the start, I got wombo comboed into oblivion and got sniped and died. I definitely knew I could do it, so I enlisted the help of the desert settlement and fought it out in the open. This fight was fought a little differently to my usual playstyle. I knew constant damage was being done through my minions and the settlers, so my focus was purely to dodge if I saw it coming at me. As like all the other bosses, I died and the team sorted out the rest. I secured the victory and obtained the vulture's bow, which not only is a ranged weapon, meaning I can now play a little bit safer, but it does piercing damage too, meaning it can deal with groups of mobs. Straight after tackling the vulture, I set off on some work on the settlement, creating some farmland so that I could automate some plants for the alchemy ingredients needed later. Sunflowers would be useful for life elixirs in the deep caves, and also critical for health potions, as these would then be needed for greater health potions. I would also need wheat for breeding animals, and sugar beets to create sugar, which is an ingredient in late game food. Following my small amount of contributions to my own settlement, I decided to take the guard with me as protection and headed to the pirate village, where during my setup of an arena, I got ambushed and died. But I guess nobody said pirates fight fair. So for a first run and nearly 50% of the HP gone, this is nothing to shy away from. The pirate captain should be a breeze, I say, as I die for a second time. But we all know third time is the lucky charm. So, guard at the ready, we fought. I had to make sure my guard and summons were in the arena before blocking it off, as if they did get blocked, I'd be seriously handicapping myself. The fight went pretty smoothly. I just ran in circles and let the team do the rest. Whilst I used the Guardian Shell to block some damage from time to time, it felt good to survive a fight and win this time. But now we have obtained the deep ladder, granting access to the final 5 fights of the game. So before I head down and die a whole bunch more, I hired the pirate and the stylist he had prisoner, and then I also wanted to grab a few trinkets to assist me throughout the rest of the game. Trinkets that I probably should have got earlier. I scooped up the following trinkets: the lifeline from the pirate island, the frozen heart from the snow caves, and just as I had found it, I got notified of a second raid on the island. This time they would be equipped with hard mode gear, as I just defeated the pirate. So, like last time, I swam out to greet them, except this time I was met with preparation and a quick demise. Thankfully, my guard could hold his own and provided support throughout the entire raid. I recalled him back to me and ran back to the shoreline to defend. And surprise, surprise, I died again. At this point, I was panicking. If they reach my settlers, I'll surely lose 1 or 2 of them due to the nature of war. So I rushed back and died for a 3rd time in a single raid. But they were at the village, so I played it safe, spawned my summons, hid behind corners, and put my stabby bushes at choke points. I was doing well till I got sniped by a mob in demonic armor. My death count has gone from 17 to 21 in just a single raid. Thankfully, I wasn't doing this on hardcore mode, because my run would have ended ages ago. But I respawned like the god my character is in his full setup of plot armor and sent his minions to battle, pushing back the forces and causing the raiders to retreat. Aside from myself dying a bunch of times, no other casualties were made, and they dropped some tungsten armor and weaponry too, so I jagged myself a few little upgrades. After the raid, I went back to searching for trinkets and obtained the air vessel from the desert. so that I could dash 3 times. With all the trinkets I wanted from the regular caves, I now set forth into the deep caves of the forest. With the deep caves comes a checklist of its own. I would need to immediately find an advanced workstation so that I could combine my trinkets, with the most important being my lifeline and frozen heart into a frozen soul, and my balanced foci with a frostfire stone. Then just some odd ones here and there for maybe resilience or a few more summons. I would also need to craft a bone trinket. This is essential and adds armor penetration, which is essentially just an ignore enemy defense stat. This will make early summons pretty viable again and give a big boost to my stabby bushes and just generally increase my power all around. I would need to farm Cave Glow for greater health potions, obtain enough life elixirs to gain another 100 health, get my tungsten tank armor, and then finally upgrade to the ancient armor later on. With all of that, I could then defeat the Reaper, the Cryo Queen, the Pest Warden, Sage and Grit, and finally complete the challenge and defeat the Fallen Wizard. Very quickly, I managed to find an advanced workstation and took the opportunity to combine my lifeline and frozen heart into a frozen soul. This frees up a trinket slot for the bone hilt. In hindsight, I should have just grabbed it and ran, as I got jumped and shortly after I died. I decided I'd go back, grab my stuff, and bring it back with me this time. And then from the safety of my village, I crafted myself a bone hilt, merged my resilience items together, and then merged my summon items together and made my first life elixir potion to get me 10 extra health. I knew I needed more, so I went back in on the hunt for tungsten and life quartz. I stumbled across another skeleton fortress and made sure I tracked down and hunted each life quartz caveling I could find. Shortly in my search, I also found some cave glow, which meant I could now plant it back at the settlement to start automating greater health potions. In my hunt for the life quartz, I got enough tungsten to make a better pickaxe and some boots. I died 2 more times, but managed to walk away with a ton of life quartz to make myself enough life elixirs to get me to 300 HP with some sunflowers I had. I also had enough to get me to 330 HP for when I did get enough sunflowers. Lastly, I crafted myself the tungsten helmet to complete my armor set, and then in my chaotic nature of things, I decided to try the Reaper without even setting up an arena. I also took the guard with me as he kinda just acts like an extra summon. So on my first fight, I don't think I did too bad. At nearly 50% HP, just before phase 2, I got baited by a scythe and perished at the hands of the Reaper. So, naturally I came back, cleared an arena, got more health, summoned my minions, buffed up, and tried again, but that didn't work either. I began testing different ideas. I tried the Shadow Bolt for homing missiles, and when he was still, I used the sword to gain resilience. But that also wasn't enough, and he mopped the floor with me. This time round, I thought I'd give the guard a bow, so he can always be dealing damage, and tried the same strategy as last time, but still no luck, and I ended up in pieces. I reassessed and thought this strategy would work. I equipped my guard with the shadow armor so that it would cause haunt on the Reaper and deal passive damage over time, and then that synergized well with the shadow bolt I gave him. Then I would just melee when I got the chance and let the summons and guard do the rest. Still no joy, and just to confirm that it wasn't entirely a skill issue, I tried again and failed again. With 7 deaths solely to the Reaper, I went out, bought myself a shotgun, some ammunition, and a sniper rifle. I thought the guard can have the shotgun and I can use the sniper's ability to see further ahead and predict its movements. But then I thought the sniper has good damage and the guard is programmed to be more accurate than me. So he had the sniper and I had the shotgun, and yet again another death. I then tried me having the sniper rifle and gave the guard a full set of tungsten boomerangs. This fight was interesting to witness as the sniper makes the movement super janky and difficult to manage. I have to be quick with my mouse movements so I could track the Reaper each time he teleported, but I still died. I never thought I'd have this much trouble on this boss, so I decided to go trinket hunting. I explored a bit more of the deep caves and got myself a firestone, then headed on over to the deep snow caves searching for a frost stone and found one on my first chest, and then died trying to get enough glacial ore to get a glacial armor set. I returned, snagged myself some ice skates, the best pickaxe in the game, the ice pickaxe. This has the highest tool damage and I believe the highest speed as well. Died again, stumbled across a treasure room that I can't do as I can't see the solution, but I would return after I beat the Reaper and just fly over using a hoverboard. Returned after exploring, I made some glacial armor, combined my 2 stones into a frost fire stone, and then combined that with my balanced foci to give me a balanced frost fire foci. I then combined my ice skates with my vampire's gift so that I got increased movement speed and the ability to walk nicely on ice. I then swapped out my resilience manacle item as resilience just won't cut it this late into the game on brutal mode. I then went back out exploring and returned with what I needed to make the glacial chest piece, finishing the set. This set bonus gives me a ranged projectile with melee attacks, so it may just prove to be that small DPS boost I need. Now that I'm all decked out, I return to the fight. I equipped my guard with my old tungsten armor and a tungsten spear and hoped for the best. This was the closest I'd gotten and it proved it was possible with a bit more skill. I got him down to 3.5%. However, I had a bright idea. I returned to the desert and got a much needed upgrade. The vulture summons from the ancient vulture. But even that didn't help and I died again. At this point, I was getting frustrated, I was stubborn, and I knew it could be done. I would just have to do better. So I stuck at it and went for it again. Little did I know, this was the run that would succeed. So here's the full fight played back at 3 times speed. So, just like that, blood, sweat and tears, and 13 deaths later, the Reaper has been defeated and thankfully dropped the one item I wanted, the Reaper's Scythe. This weapon can hit through walls, pass through enemies, and fires at a very fast rate. With 7 of the 11 bosses down, it was time to prepare for the Cryo Queen. In my opinion, she is one of the hardest bosses in the game and quite often my most difficult boss to defeat. This was going to be tough. So I had already acquired glacial gear, so the only thing for me to do was set up a boss arena. As I was sleeping to pass the time, I got notified of my 3rd raid. The timing on these guys have been impeccable. Each time I defeated a boss, bumping them up a tier, they would instantly start a raid. As always, I needed to fight first in order to save my settlement. I went out and struck first, but their advancements was too much and I had to back away to the shore. As I was doing so, one got a lucky hit in and snagged a kill for themselves. I ran back out and used the trees as cover whilst my scythe flew through the air, tearing them apart. But I got greedy, I tried to advance out in the open and got picked off again. As the leader of the settlement, I continued to throw myself headfirst into the fights to do what must be done to protect my people. And just like that, with only 2 of my own deaths, I yet again protected my people. So, impending doom dealt with, it was back to my most dreaded boss, the Cryo Queen. I went to the arena and started the fight. The fight didn't go so well and neither did the next few attempts. What you're watching is a lovely death montage where I didn't really change my style too much. I swapped to the Summoner Glacial set for more summons, enchanted my gear, and just kept throwing myself at her. I even tried taking a guard a few times with me. Eventually, I gave up and went to the deep desert to obtain a full set of ancient fossil armor. Breaking the pots down here gives generous amounts of ancient fossil bars, and my ice pickaxe meant I could just mine all the fossils I would need. The ancient fossil armor would be my best endgame armor that I was able to achieve. So if I couldn't defeat the Cryo Queen in this, I wouldn't be able to do it at all. After exploring the majority of the desert caves, I returned and crafted the full summon ancient fossil set. Whilst it was less in defense, the other perks made up for it, and the set ability guaranteeing 100% crits for a small window is an insane damage boost. However, this is how things continued to go. So I had a bright idea. The sand knife deals 500 damage over 5 seconds. And if I gave it to a settler, then all I'd have to do is dodge while it did the chip damage. That didn't work either, and I figured maybe Sage and Grit would be easier, and I could get a better summon or bow from them. I hardly even had time to think, let alone fight, so it was back to the drawing board. As I was looking through the caves to find loot, I stumbled across a trap room. This proved to be quite fun, completely zoomed in. It was like being in a mini Indiana Jones scene. What a lot of people don't know is most of these rooms can be trivialized by just moving. With this first area, just take it slow. And then for this next part, just continue to run past and you'll have made it through before the traps even activate. And the same goes for the next part. The spiked floors, just pick a lane and dash through. You might take one hit, but then quickly run through to the next part. This spike maze is the only part that requires some patience, and whilst I was zoomed in, if I had picked a wrong pathway, it would have been another death for me. Finally, the last room, just run to the end without any hesitation and the traps won't catch up to you. And voila, we obtained the loot. So I mustered up another idea. As I can't see the boss too well, and I can't preemptively dash out of the way as I don't know where they are, I crafted the Carapace Shield, which protects me from 90% damage whilst I still have stamina, and I could also use the dash from my hotbar. So with my shield and antique rifle, this is how it went. I had one final trick up my sleeve that I knew I still had to do. Early on in this video, I mentioned how important sugar and milk are. Well, if you combine sugar, milk, a lemon, and flour, you get a lemon tart. Lemon tarts give armor penetration, the same as the bone hilt, so this is another huge DPS increase. I already had some lemon trees planted, so I just needed to set something up for flour, sugar, and milk. But me being stubborn, I just wanted to fight the boss and win. So I tackled her 3 more times, all ending in failure. I finally bit the bullet and decided now was a good time to start cooking up some lemon tarts. I created a mill to get sugar and flour, and then automated it so that my settlers would do it for me. I also realized I hadn't been farming wheat, so I planted a few wheat seeds as I would need wheat for the flour and also to breed the cows for more milk. I also upgraded my vulture staff to a cryo staff. Now the only reason I didn't do this earlier is because I've always found them to be too slow or inaccurate to be useful, so I just rated them as a worse summon. But I was in dire need to try something new. Whilst I waited for some lemon tart ingredients, I decided to test out the cryo staff. I went down and fought the queen, and much to my surprise, I'm not sure if it was the new staff or skill, but I won, leaving just 3 bosses to go. I turned in my quest and claimed my first banner stand. These are critical for the final 3 bosses. I would need a traveling merchant so I could buy 3 more so that I could house one of each flag. The defense flag, the summon flag, the speed flag, and the power flag. Each flag adds 30% to its respective buff. So defense, summon speed, my own speed, and damage. A 30% defense increase and damage increase alone is insane. Whilst I waited for a traveling merchant, I blew up a large portion of the Void dungeon. This is why I mentioned earlier that the pirate captain is so handy. You can just buy bombs and dynamite from him and pretty much quadruple your money with each one of them thrown in the dungeon by selling back the walls and furniture to the pawnbroker. So by selling just 1 pack of dungeon loot, I got just over 5,500 gold, and that was really just for half a pack. So I did that a few times just to get some money for all the enchantments. I also needed each banner flag. This required 30 wool each, and because I hadn't set up a farm, I went and did a quick double wool trick. Anytime you find a sheep, you shear the sheep for some wool and then kill them for some extra wool. So I just hopped from settlement to settlement, shearing and slaughtering until I had enough for all 4 flags. In the process, a traveling merchant arrived and I purchased myself the 3 extra banner stands I needed, and then with the wool, I proceeded to craft all 4 flags. It was then time to head to the deep swamp make an arena, and prepare for the pest warden. But during the process, I died. Once the area was clear enough, I placed down my banner stands, popped the banners into them, and prepared for a fight. My preparation consisted of building a cow pen and automating it with a husbandry zone, and told them to fill the food trough with a maximum of 20 wheat at a time, and then I went off to leash some cows. I also needed an animal keeper, so as I went to hire one, he was asking for some gold and 15 leather. Naturally, I decimated his entire cow stock, gave him the leather from them, and told him he now works for me. Whilst I waited for the ingredients for the lemon tarts, I thought let's see what I'm up against and tried to fight the pest warden. It wasn't a success, but you can at least see that I dealt about 60% before dying. I also tried a second time and did much better with 20% remaining. This is definitely doable. So with everything ready, I buffed up, ate a lemon tart for extra armor penetration, and started the fight. My strategy was that I would use the shield when he wasn't circling, if I even caught a glimpse of him, and then when he started circling, I knew it was safe to get a hit with the carapace dagger for a free 500 damage, and summon my stabby bushes. Then, if he decided to dash on top of me, I could block using my shield, and then use the force of wind from my hotbar to dash out of the way. This felt like a much easier fight, the free damage with the dagger, the shield tanking the hits. It just felt smooth and like I'd finally found a build that could take me through to the end game. Following that fight, I had 2 bosses left. I headed straight down to the deep desert caves to fight Sage and Grit, whilst my lemon tart buff was still active. Using the same strategy as the pest warden, I utilized the shield to block whenever I saw a hint of Sage or Grit, and then just summoned stabby bushes whenever I had the chance. This fight came right down to the wire, but for my first real attempt, I'm proud that it only took 1 attempt. This fight can usually pose to be very difficult, but the carapace shield trivialized it. So I rushed my way through the final dungeon gauntlet and ended up at the Fallen Wizard. So here I am standing in front of the Fallen Wizard, setting up the arena with my banners when I realized I didn't even use them for Sage and Grit. That actually made me feel really confident that this fight wouldn't pose too much of a threat either. So I buffed up and gave it my best first attempt. What I had overlooked for this fight was 2 of his moves and 1 key mechanic. The first move was his purple waves he spawns that come from all angles. They are crazy unpredictable and give me minimal time to react to them as I'm so zoomed in. The second was the dragons he spawns. For some reason, these dragons move faster than Sage and Grit and give me no warning as to where they will attack from or when, which provided to be the biggest threat in this fight. Lastly, the 1 mechanic I overlooked made this tougher than I ever thought. The distance I had to be for my summons to fight him. If I was too far away, then my summons did nothing. So I had some things to think about, seeing as I did end up dying after only taking down 40% HP. I did try a couple attempts again just to get a feel for the boss and try out some old strategies like using the sniper rifle to see far away in a hope to nab the dragons. I also went back to using the cryo staff too, which felt good but didn't net me the win either. So I devised a plan. I would get the slime summon from the pest warden as they cover a lot of ground and deal impact damage, meaning that when his dragons flew over them, they would get hit. So I defeated the pest warden 3 more times as the desire sensor kicked in. I knew I wanted the summon, so it gave it to me last on the loot pool. With my new summons, I went back to the Fallen Wizard, and I also gave the guard the scythe as it does big area damage, which would also combat the dragons when they fly through. Now, all I had to do was summon stabby bushes and block attacks while staying relatively close. And just like that, I have completed the challenge. This has probably been one of my toughest challenges yet, and editing through all 12 hours of gameplay took a crazy amount of time, as I've never attempted anything on this scale before. If you made it through this far, let me know down in the comments by commenting Stabby Bush is innocent. So let's just get back to the main settlement and see what the game looks like zoomed out. Once again, a huge thank you to the team over at Fair Games for letting me play the graphics update early and share this with you. I hope you all have a great time zone, so good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you may be, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye.